You shall not kill. The commandment against destruction. While the commandment, honor your father and your mother, portrays the foundation for the longevity of tradition, it implies also a prohibition against destroying the continuity of life, not just physical life based on heredity, but also the life of tradition, understood as the moral, spiritual content of the passage of time. Time is implicitly a process of depreciation, degeneration, sclerosis, and in a word, dying. In contrast, tradition is the life-sustaining power which counters the gates of hell, i.e., death. For example, to belong to a long family tradition is something positive only if the family dynasty is the bearer of a living moral spiritual tradition. Otherwise, belonging to an old family generally means a certain level of physical and spiritual degeneration. This holds true in the case of the descendants of the Crusaders, for example, who betrayed their original ideals and duties of Christian knighthood and became brigands. The reward for the betrayal of tradition is almost inevitably degeneration in the family line of descent, often ending in debilitation and weak-mindedness. Tradition is ensouled time. Life is ensouled corporeality. Killing is de-souling, the separation of the soul from the body. You shall not kill thus forbids not just murder, i.e. the violent separation of the soul of some other human being from his body, but also the violent de-souling of tradition, whose life's duration is founded on honoring father and mother. This latter kind of killing takes place on a large scale and does not happen less often than the killing of individual human beings. When, for example, Christian missionaries do not convert to the so-called heathens by allowing the unique moral beauty and spiritual richness of Christianity to speak to them, but instead by convincing the heathens that their fathers and mothers were in error, e.g. for worshipping the sun, moon, and stars as divine, and for promulgating this worship, then they kill. That is, they de-soul a living tradition, and implicitly they teach, do not honor your father and mother. This was, for example, the moral problem that troubled Francis Xavier, concerning which he sought advice by writing to the general of the Jesuit order, St. Ignatius. In that letter, he gave a report concerning the great loyalty of the heathens, whose conversion to Christianity he was occupied with, to the commandment, honor your father and your mother. They declared, if the fate of those who were not baptized is the place of damnation, and the fate of those who are baptized is the blessedness of heaven, then they would prefer to share the fate of their fathers and mothers in hell, rather than attaining to divine blessedness for themselves without their fathers and mothers. What can one do or say here? Asked Francis Xavier. Other missionaries, who were less sensitive than he, supposed that the religion of the natives whom they undertook to convert was the work of the devil, and they acted correspondingly. They sowed doubt and mistrust, and, as a result of their disdain towards the fathers and mothers, they killed the living tradition in order to make room for a new one. Their attitude can be expressed with the maxim, kill to make room for new life. This, however, was not the attitude of the very first missionary, the Apostle Paul. In his missionary activity, St. Paul established a connection to what was most valuable concerning the living tradition, and showed how it finds its perfection and fulfillment in the Christian message. In this sense, he was a Jew with the Jews and a Greek with the Greeks. He did not approach the altar in Athens, which was erected to the unknown God, as an altar dedicated to the devil, and he treated the messianic expectation of the Jews from the point of view that it had its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, this attitude of the Apostle Paul in the missionary activity of the Church was later abandoned. Instead, destruction and compulsion were used, especially in the time when victorious Christianity became the state religion of the Roman Empire, approximately from the time of Emperor Constantine the Great to the time of Emperor Justinian. Initially, official practice of the cults of the old religions was forbidden. Then, temples and other places of such cults were desecrated and closed. And lastly, even the private practice of heathen cults was forbidden under punishment of death. Finally, Emperor Justinian put an end to the teaching of philosophy by closing the academy in Athens. and banishing its teachers from the empire. Thus the Hellenic religion, its cults and its philosophy, were killed to make room for the life of the newer tradition. What the ruling paganism as state religion of the Roman Empire had tried to do to Christianity as it was coming into existence, namely to kill it as a living tradition, ruling Christianity as the state religion of the Roman Empire did to the old tradition of the fathers and mothers, i.e., it killed it. However, the substance of something which lives does not get destroyed. Its soul continues to exist. In becoming free of the body, it simply withdraws itself back into the realm of the unconscious, where it remains active. From there it reveals itself sooner or later in consciousness again. At first it lives as a latent inclination and yearning, in order that one day it may crystallize itself in clear consciousness as an attitude and point of view. Then a renaissance takes place, a renaissance of the spirituality, which was formerly repressed and seemingly killed, and the old love directed towards the primal ancestral fathers and mothers, seemingly having died away, having been forgotten, having fallen asleep, and having been overcome, returns to life, together with the tradition which they represented, and for which they lived. The commandment, "You shall not kill," is absolutely true, too, for the reason that in the realm of the spiritual it is impossible to kill something living. In fact, in a deeper sense, there is no killing at all. What takes place is simply an inner transformation, an alchemical process of purification and interiorization or spiritualization, but no extinction. In this sense, it can be said that all ideals and ideas of the past, which were taken seriously, including those that we view as erroneous, do not die. Heresies also do not die. They pop up again and again, even if they are thought to have been overcome long ago. This is true also for pre-Christian paganism, i.e., for belief in the cosmos, belief in the world. Today this takes the form of believing in all-encompassing evolution. Today belief in evolution dominates educational and cultural life, just as in pre-Christian times pagan myths were dominant. Christianity's suppression in the time of the pagan Caesars, who hoped to kill Christianity as a living tradition, led to the domination of Christianity in the Roman world empire. The suppression of paganism, however, in the time of the Christian Caesars, who had hoped to kill paganism by persecuting the pagans and thoroughly eradicating it, resulted in paganism's attaining once again to domination in the form of belief in evolution. This is now a fact of life within the entire world empire of the Western so-called Christian civilization. The lesson of world history is unmistakable. It says, "You shall not kill," for there is no other way of overcoming error than by way of alchemical transformation, through interiorization or spiritualization, ennoblement, and contemplation, which leads to an inner deepening, along the paths of tolerance, peaceful coexistence, and the open confrontation between error and truth, between what is useful and what is good, between what is impressive and what is nobly beautiful. However, open confrontation, under conditions of tolerance, does not mean submersion, leading finally to drowning, in the relativism of the Pilate question. What is truth? Rather, it signifies the confrontation between truths and values which are absolutely valid, but without wanting to kill. And the tolerance with which we are concerned here ought to be a reflection of God's tolerance in the sense of the following Jewish legend. As Abraham was on one of his journeys, he wanted to set up his tent for the night to rest. Suddenly a lonely wanderer appeared and requested Abraham's hospitality. Abraham was hospitable towards him and shared his evening meal with him. After the meal, Abraham suggested to the stranger that they pray together. Then it became clear, to Abraham's dismay and indignation, that the stranger was a pagan and in fact a fire worshipper. Filled with anger, Abraham wanted to kill him. Then the Lord appeared to Abraham in a vision and commanded him not to do this. The Lord spoke, "Abraham, I have been tolerating this man for 50 years, and you do not want to tolerate him even one night?" And Abraham was ashamed and allowed the stranger to spend the night in his tent. It was not that Abraham acknowledged the relative truth of fire worshipping, and thus relativized his belief in the one and only God. Rather, he learned that human beings ought to take as their model God's patience when interacting with one another. Tolerance is not relativistic indifference, but patience, which grants to the other the time and opportunity to attain to better insight through interiorization or spiritualization and contemplation, leading to an inner deepening. The rock, the sea of St. Peter, is not just a rock of solidity of belief in the meaning and confrontation with different spiritual streams through the course of time. It is also a rock of patience, which brings with it the certainty of faith. The combination of an unyielding, unshakable solidity of faith with a patience that can wait hundreds of years makes the rock of the Sea of Peter unconquerable in the confrontation with the streams of time, which are all indeed merely temporal winds and waves. For the demands and needs of the time are necessarily temporary. Also temporal, therefore, are efforts towards democratization of the Church, de-dogmatization of Church teaching through psychological interpretations, and similar endeavors to modernize the Church, her teaching, and her rules. They offend against the commandment, honor your father and your mother, and they open wide the gates of the paths that lead to death, hell. May the emulators of such innovations among theologians and the laity consider for once their responsibility in the light of the commandment, you shall not kill. The life and death of a living tradition is fundamentally similar to the life and death of the individual human being, for the life of the tradition is the ensouled corpus transmitted through time, similar to the ensouled body of the life of the individual human being. Making soulless, the separation of the soul from the body, is individual death, and the making soulless of the transmitted corpus is the dying of tradition. What is the mysterious bond which binds the soul and body to one another? What is the power which holds them together? It is more than a mere contract. It is deeper than the mere benefit of mutual dependency. Soul and body yearn for one another. The soul yearns for being enveloped by the blood's warmth, and the body yearns for the stimulation that comes from the soul which permeates it. The power of mutual love unites soul and body. Life, which consists of the union of soul and body, is the marriage of the soul and body. For this reason the commandment, you shall not commit adultery, follows the commandment, you shall not kill. For adultery is essentially a form of killing, of separating soul and body, whose union is the archetype of marriage. The notion of marriage as being analogous to the union of soul and body can be traced in unbroken fashion throughout the books of the Old Testament. In all events, the Jewish tradition understands the covenant of the community of Israel with Yahweh more deeply than a mere contract. It understands the covenant as a marriage covenant. In the Bible, that is to say, in its prophetic books, unfaithfulness towards God, who revealed himself on Mount Sinai, is correspondingly conceived of as a rebellion against his worship, e.g., in favoring the cult of Baal and Astaroth. It is designated as adultery and fornication. Amongst all other peoples of the world, the people of Israel were chosen as the bride and spouse of the Lord their God, who is a jealous God, and does not tolerate other gods before him. It was not the community of Israel which chose Yahweh as its Lord and God. On the contrary, it was chosen by him. The community of Israel was chosen as the bride of the invisible and unimaginable God Yahweh. Thus, an eternal covenant arose, one which demanded eternal loyalty, the loyalty of Israel in the form of exclusive reverence and obedience towards the invisible bridegroom, and the loyalty of God in the form of an eternal guide and presence in the destiny of Israel. For this reason, the Ark of the Covenant, and later Solomon's Temple, was the place where the meeting with the Omnipresent One could be experienced, and where the splendor, Shekinah, of God filled the Holy of Holies. The splendor, the radiating presence of God was not an idea, even less a theological, poetical conception, but instead a reality, which could mean life and death. It was so real that the unauthorized touching of the Ark of the Covenant resulted in death on the spot. Just how serious and real the covenant between Yahweh and the community of Israel was can be seen, for example, in the book of Job. Job's wife, overcome by the extreme degree of Job's suffering as he was being tried, gave him the advice, Renounce Yahweh and die. Job 2:9. This advice, desperate as it was, shows that the covenant of the community of Israel with Yahweh was as real and serious as life and death. It was really the same as the bond between the soul and body of the individual human being, where dissolution of this bond means death. In truth, therefore, it was not a mere contract, but an indissoluble union of soul and body, where Yahweh was the soul, and the community of Israel was the body. The covenant between Yahweh Elohim and the community of Israel was also a bond of marriage, in the sense that all fathers of the people of Israel created children in the name of Yahweh, out of his impulse and for his future purposes, and in the sense that all mothers of the people of Israel bore their children as a gift and blessing of the God of Israel. They conceived, carried, and bore their children as parts and members of one mother, the community of Israel, and as proof that the act of creation is not just an individual human affair, but that the power of Yahweh plays a part in it. Circumcision of the male representatives of the people of Israel was introduced as an obligatory religious practice at Yahweh's behest. For procreation and reproduction were reserved for Yahweh. In addition, he cared for future generations, for the children and children's children. Yahweh Elohim was Lord over the destiny of the future generations of the chosen people, his people. Thus the commandment, "You shall not commit adultery," contains a mighty and superhuman justification. Just as the Holy One of Israel is loyal to the covenant with the community of Israel, so also ought the community of Israel to be true to its Lord. In the bond of marriage between man and woman is mirrored the marriage covenant of Yahweh with the people of Israel. For this reason, adultery was considered to correspond to the people of Israel's violation of loyalty towards their God, before whom you shall have no other gods. The commandment, "You shall not kill," also expresses the obligation to the bond that unites the soul to the body, which is, in fact, a marriage between soul and body. Severing this bond is killing, and it is also a form of adultery. Murder and adultery belong together. The commandments prohibiting adultery, stealing, slandering, and coveting what belongs to one's neighbor are actually contained in the commandment, "You shall not kill." They are specific manifestations of the prohibition of murder, which is the severing of the bond that holds body and soul together. For the body is the primary immediate place of action for consciousness. It is the soul's most inherent possession in this world. It is a piece of the outside world that belongs to the soul more than all of the rest of the outside world. This affiliation goes so far and is so intimate that the soul's consciousness even identifies itself with the body, and often characterizes and perceives the body as I. Indeed, this identification goes so far that the phrase has been coined, "The human being has a soul." Here, with human being, is meant the body. It would be more correct to say that the soul of the human being has a body, for it is the body that the soul has. That is, the body is the soul's possession. The human being is a soul, and the soul has the body as its place of action. If then the body is a piece of the outside world, which is in the special intimate possession of the soul, so also that portion of the outside world which is called and perceived as possession is a kind of extended body, an extension of the field of action of the human soul. In this sense, the house, yard, garden, and field of my neighbor is his extended body. Every human being possesses a body which he has received as his possession, i.e., as the place of development of his consciousness. He also has an extended body that is a portion of the external world, which belongs to him as his very own, his property. Just as possession is an extended body, so is the good reputation, respect, and trust which the human being enjoys with other human beings, an extended soul. Here it is a matter of the projection of the human being's soul into the life of soul of other human beings, and of the manner in which the soul mirrors itself in other human beings. And slander, false witness against your neighbor, is a killing of this extended soul life in other human beings, in that the reflection of the soul in the soul life of other human beings is distorted and destroyed. Slander is, therefore, moral murder and robbery. God, however, is the God of life, of joining together, of uniting, and not of death, of separating body and soul, man and woman, possession and possessor. The last set of commandments, as we have seen, is contained in the commandment, "You shall not kill," which in turn is an extension of the commandment about the longevity of tradition, "Honor your father and your mother." The last set of commandments relates to life, marriage, possession, and honor towards the self of the other, neighbor. The life, marriage, possessions, and honor of another human being are just as inviolable as they are for oneself. The commandment, "Honor your father and your mother," is in turn related to the commandment of keeping holy the Sabbath. "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy," refers to the absolute necessity for the soul to have periods of quiet for the sake of interiorization and spiritualization, to keep alive the bond between God and the human self, I. This interiorization in peace and quiet makes possible the becoming aware of father love and mother love as mirrors of divine love. But what is the relationship of the commandment of keeping holy the Sabbath to the preceding commandments of Yahweh? Here we touch upon the union through love of the human being with God. However, this also raises the question as to the identity of Yahweh.